Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cybersecurity Awareness Forum for Wednesday, September 6th, 2023. We're in session number 27, Beyond Phishing Links. What else do employees need to know about phishing or about any kind of cyber attacks, right? So we're going to be having some fun today looking at various different things. We talk a lot about phishing links, so let's talk about other things today. With that, we're going to start things off. If you aren't familiar with how the program typically works, we go about an hour. Most people stay the full time. Hopefully you can stay as long as it's valuable to you. But we do record all of these sessions and we put them on our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to find them hopefully at that QR code. We also take transcripts and we create blog posts that have a lot of the highlights and values. And then when we, every quarter, we put together a quarterly report called the CISO Report on Security Awareness. And we just issued the second version for Q2 of 2023. And that's available on the QR code that you see there. So we do lots of cool things with these sessions that are valuable to people afterwards. But we really like having people here live because that's where we get all the opinions and great lessons learned and things. So one last point, we're going to be doing some polls. If we can, we'll stop so people can pay attention to the polls, but sometimes we get deep into discussions and I'll just launch them. The panelists won't be able to participate, they can see them. But if you see a poll pop up, please take a moment to just answer it, even though we may be on another topic of deep discussion. And then towards the end, I really like to wrap things up with some lessons learned for three different audiences. One is, the executives. What can we give to executives to help them in decision making? Secondly, the practitioners and the security awareness managers and the people deploying programs. What can we do to help them? And then if there are individuals either on live or joining us later to watch the recordings, what kinds of tips have we come up with during the session that we can share with them? So I really want us to think, and maybe if you can take a moment at the end of this session or before you leave, just type in the chat, what you thought was really useful or valuable in this session. And that'll help us, because when we do the transcripts, we can highlight some of the things that people are saying that will really provide us with the summary of the value at the end. So thanks for all that. Before we dive into things though, a couple of orders of business we usually do, and that is for everybody to type in where they're coming from around the world. It's really fun to see, the global participation that we have. And I know I've missed a few, but I can see we've got Dallas, Toronto, Canada. Ryan, any others that were in here before?
We got North Carolina, as always. Thank you, Fletus. Colorado, Maryland, Toronto. And then I got some temperatures thrown out there. 96 in North Carolina. Nick in Colorado says 88. It's Matthew from Brooklyn. Feels like 97. We got Portland, Maine. Man, I'm a weatherman too, right?
What's it like in Edmonton these days?
I don't know. Is there anyone?
Yeah, Cleopatra's here from Edmonton, and Stephanie as well. So yeah, let us know how things are going out there, if it's any colder than it is here. It's pretty hot in Ottawa. So all right, well, let's get on with things. Today, what we're going to do, actually, before one more order of business, Ryan, you're supposed to be introducing the panelists. You can tell how professional this setup is, but we try.
Oh, we're doing our best. We got Detroit, Mississauga, Waterloo. Everyone's coming in here. There we go. 14 degrees in Edmonton. I'll take that any day. Anyway, panelists, thank you very much for the panelists, and thanks everyone for joining us. Today on the panel, we've got Sid. Sid's currently the head of IT at Greenpeace Canada and currently studying for a CISSP. He's worked in the nonprofit and corporate sectors and ran his own IT services business for over 15 years. Next up, we have Erin. Erin has been working in the security awareness field for 5 years. She's helped build programs for companies ranging from 1,200 employees to 500,000. Erin has a true passion for maintaining the human connection in all things security and awareness. Next up, we've got Fletus. Fletus is a seasoned IT and security professional, currently a security operations manager. Beyond his expertise, he finds immense joy in sharing his passion for cybersecurity with others. And finally on the panel today, we've got Michelle. Michelle is the founder of Risu, a consultancy that helps startups to create meaningful and simple security education strategies. She's also an expert target shopper and gets therapy from Peloton rides. Thank you to all the panelists. And I'm Ryan Healey-Ogden, Director of Cybersecurity Solutions here at ClickArmor. And Scott, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thanks very much, Ryan. I'm Scott Wright, CEO of ClickArmor. We created ClickArmor as a security awareness training platform that's very different from everything else. I'll tell you about that a little bit later. But for now, my background is actually engineering and did a lot of security awareness training over the last 15 years. So I've met a lot of these great people, and I just thought it was really important for us to bring all these people together. So really hope everybody gets good value out of the session. So what I'm going to do now is I have one context slide. I usually start with a little bit of my own context so that people can see what we're really trying to focus on today. We decided to make this session all about things that are not phishing links or email links. So there are a lot of things that we have to teach employees about that aren't necessarily just about phishing links, obviously. So what I did was I put together this little slide that gives some context, between the attacker and the employees. What are the methods that they use? And in the end, because we have layered security, when we talk about good balance of security, there's people, there's processes, and there's technologies. And when you have a layering of those safeguards, we actually, the employees hopefully don't see too many of the threats actually reach them. But there are always things that fail. And so the employees do see phishing messages sometimes. They do see a lot of other things. So we want to give that context in this slide to show what are the things that employees might see. And this isn't meant to be exhaustive or detailed, really just to give a context for today's discussion. The network attacks, employees might not directly be attacked from the network, but they might see different performance or errors that would occur on the network because of an attack. And it's up to them. Obviously, we want to teach them to report these things. Email, we spend a lot of time on links, but there are also sender addresses, which I think are one of the more important things that we don't teach people enough about. And then, of course, body and attachments. SMS and text messages, I really hate these because there's really not a lot of guidance you can give people. Basically, you need to treat every SMS message or text message as being suspicious unless you're expecting it or it's coming from somebody that you really, really know. Voicemail, don't rely on caller ID to tell you where the call came from, because there are so many ways that can be spoofed. Live and in person, sometimes attackers will do that, but they're going to use their badges and things that show they have authority. Have to teach people to verify those things. Just because people say they are a certain person, how do we get people to sort of dig a little deeper when it's a suspicious situation? And then finally, the USB or portable storage devices that, I have probably told quite a few of you that I did some experiments back in the 2008, 2012 timeframe where I would drop USB drives. It was called the Honey Stick Project. And it's funny because it was very timely then. It was before, a little bit before the mass adoption of smartphones. And so, USB drives were a big vector, Conficker, if you remember those those viruses, to teach people about not putting things in devices. And then for a while, between 2012 and 2020, 21, everything went to the cloud. And so, tend not to use them anymore. But now we're actually seeing a lot more use of portable devices that plug in via USB. And I'm seeing a lot of organizations that are really focused on policies for portable storage devices. They're coming back for some reason. So we could talk about that and what we can teach people about external devices. So that's my context for the start of the session. And we'll ask some questions as we go along and get people to spend a little more time delving into some of these things. We also have a series of poll questions that if we have time, I'll stop the discussion so people can focus on the polls. But as I said, I might pop these things up during the middle of a discussion. We're going to ask people, where are those kinds of threat clues that we can teach people? We're going to ask if your organization has been a victim of a social engineering attack that's not email related. And we're going to ask, does your organization include anything in their policies around portable storage devices? So some things for people to think about as we do the polls. I'll start one later on, but let's dig into the discussion. I'm going to ask the panelists. We're not going to do a round table like we used to. We're going to ask you to just raise your hand when you have a comment or question. And people, obviously, we want you to enter comments and questions in the chat. If you have lessons learned, if you have a really good story, we'll try and highlight yours. So at this point, we would like to ask, the panel, what methods are they seeing attackers using to make attacks more convincing these days? So beyond just tricky links. So I'm going to turn it over and let Ryan, I guess, moderate and see who has their hands up.
Yep, absolutely, will do. Anyone? There you go, Fletus. I'll let you lead it off.
So for the late Kevin Mitnick, I'll talk about just phone social engineering real quick. I've dealt with cases. I've been involved in several of them. It's mainly because if anyone knows about Kevin, he got his start by dumpster diving. So just being careful what you dispose of, where you dispose of it, how you share it. Also, when you're in public places, don't discuss a lot of confidential data, like where you work, who you work with, what floor you work on, enough that someone can build a profile about you. Because that's where most of your evidence is going to come today, is we're returning to office. A lot of companies, as of Labor Day, have decided to now return to the office. So there's now faces walking into a building that's never walked into it before. So there's no idea if you're supposed to be in the building. So if you've done your research, you've social engineered yourself, you can walk into these new return to office places, walk a floor, insert things, extract things, and walk away. So that's where I wanted to open up with, is we had the phone phreaking, we had the dumpster diving, and now just a reminder with return to office, you may see people for the first time that you've never met walking onto your premise. So as Scott opened with, check a badge if you have it, ask for credentials, verify as much as you can. It's going to be tricky. It's going to be hard for organizations as they're returning to office.
Yeah, that's an absolute super valid point. And I think just the oversharing, I mean, I was just got away over the long weekend for some R&R, and we're in public and you're around people, and it was just so interesting again to just pay attention to what people talk about, and especially when you're in a situation where strangers meet strangers, and there's a lot of, oh, what do you do? Well, I do this, and then you get their name, and then they're, oh, look at my Instagram, oh, here's my social media, and you just in a observation in about 5 to 7 minutes, you could probably profile the an entire employee. And then to Fletus's point, now who they are, where they work, etc. You can impersonate them, walk through the doors. I mean, it's endless with the amount of information we so easily share. Anyone else on the panel have any thoughts or feedback on this? Erin?
Not that I'm a guru in AI or chat GPT by any stretch of the imagination here. But to the question of what methods are attackers using to make them more convincing, there was quite a few conversations at the SANS Awareness Summit about how ChatGPT and different AI methods are making any sort of attack more convincing, whether it's able to be more of a spear phishing attack without the effort that spear phishing used to take. Or I would say too, just the technology of phishing calls and how AI is now able to make people's voices better. So now we are in a whole new realm of things to teach, especially like our grandparents who might be more convinced by something like that. So just emerging technologies are really making attacks much more convincing from every angle.
Yeah, like let's reference back to our entire session we did on deepfakes, right? And how the video and the audio and everything else is beyond convincing now. And we talked about having those code words and different kind of methods to kind of try and break that potential fraud. But it's ChatGPT is scary. I mean, obviously we see the emails all the time improving in their language, and so if us as security professionals are starting to like second guess these, then we have to assume that the general user it's going to be right over their head, and that's where we really need to find ways to educate people how to spot these things. Sid, do you have any thoughts on this? Because I know you are a ChatGPT guru and an AI fanatic.
Specifically, there was a report recently on a threat actor. It was a state threat actor that is known that they have a specific large language model that is built specifically for malware and creating exploits as well. And this was demoed, and there was something that was released and demoed, and this, I had seen this on LinkedIn. Personally, for me, I've seen emails with phishing emails with proper language, but what I wanted to talk about to make things more convincing, Fletus had mentioned some sort of recon, and if this recon is done, the timing of the attack becomes important. And I have recently seen something happen which was coincidental. There was a smishing, which is a SMS, but it happened at exactly the time I was sending a package, and it came up as Canada Post for this person, and they luckily asked, is this coming from you? And if they had the security awareness to actually do that, but the context of time or place or these kinds of things comes into play. So if somebody has done research enough to know when to do an attack, I believe that context.
Yeah, that's a great point. And also, yeah, it's not just going to be like that fake voice or video or anything like that. That what the AI models are now able to do is they're able to write malware, and they could write scripts, left, right, and center, and just be pumping these out just to, to become targets and stuff like that. That all the different tools can use. So yeah, it's a full array of different kind of potential attack vectors there. Just a chat comment from Russell. When it comes to securing AI, please consider reviewing my book. Cool. The CISO's Guide to Securing Artificial Intelligence. Drop it in a little plug there early, but we'd love to. I always read the comments without checking them, but I guess everyone gets one. And so Russell, there's your free one.
No, that's great. It's relevant for sure, as Erin pointed out. Okay, so what I'm going to do at this point then is launch a poll. First question is around the same question we just talked about with the panel, but I'd like to hear the attendees' points of view. Aside from phishing links, what are the most important clues that employees should know how to handle or to avoid with cyber attacks? So if you could take a moment to respond to the options there, which are email sender addresses, email attachments, activity notifications on your account, SMS and text messages, voice or voicemail content, or other, which you can enter in the chat. You can put clues just to align this with the poll question so that we know that the chat message is coming for this question. So while we're doing that, any panelists have any comments on these things just from a slightly different perspective in terms of those things that are becoming more compelling for people?
Yeah, we've also got a question from the chat that maybe the panel, someone on the panel might want to tackle. Any advice on what startups or mom and pop shop owners with less of a budget can do to mitigate phishing attacks? And Michelle, this is kind of your wheelhouse, so I'm going to let you go.
This is my wheelhouse, yeah, because I advise startups or SMEs, and I do a lot of work in education, which tends to be very, even if you have a lot of money in education effectively, but it doesn't get spent on cybersecurity. And you're often working with very, very limited resources. So, one person doing everything, and generally speaking, there's an IT person, and they're not necessarily a cybersecurity person, because there's very different areas, although obviously there can be. So I always advise people to just keep it simple, and not buy in 100,000 different vendor tools. There's always, I have to push back on this, particularly in not so much with the startups, but with the education, because the startups and the SMEs tend to be a little bit more savvy. And this isn't to say my education colleagues aren't savvy at all, but because you can go into a school. I've gone into schools and worked on technology issues, and even the principal didn't know that there was some of this technology within the school. So it just gets signed on and brought on. And we talk about working in silos, but there's there's an extreme there. So yes, I think education is the most important thing. The thing I was going to say, just to, because I don't want to talk too much, is that I think the big piece that we always miss is community education. It's the big thing, because just about every single thing that's come in that I've seen has been via WhatsApp, LinkedIn, Instagram, that kind of thing. And you can get a load of rich stuff if you're profiling someone, if you find out, that they're on a dating app, and then if you were really targeting them. And but equally, just going in and getting them to click on a link, hey, do you want this job or whatever else, or hey, send me money, I'm your, we've talked about this with the deepfake conversation. And I think we're missing the mark, because we're trying to talk to just employees. And as a sector, as a cybersecurity sector, we do need to do much more community outreach. And that will then hit, and that would work. That would be working with SMEs and potentially startups, and really giving them solid advice, but listening to what they need, because we tend to go in and go, oh, you're this. And actually, no, you've got to listen first. So that's what I'd say.
Good comments. Fletus.
So some of it's already came out in the chat, so I'll just reiterate it. I mean, there's free materials out there. I mean, you've got what we're doing here. We publish blogs. There's other knowledge sharing companies out there. You can get government agencies who give away free data. There's a lot of stuff that you can not have to produce yourselves. We've talked about ChatGPT. There's AI who can help you do this. So you can dabble in it. And if it's a small enough company, having one-on-one conversations can go a long way. Just introducing yourself, building a rapport. Let them, if they see something, be willing to share it with you with, as I've used before, carrot, not stick. Just let them share it with you.
Okay, Erin.
I really just want to hit on Fletus's point too, that I think things like ChatGPT are always talked about in the attacker's light, but they can be so beneficial to us and to people that need a free resource to help with this kind of stuff, where you can ask questions, verify the information. I will clarify that. Make sure the information that it's giving you is true. But there is such a benefit to things like ChatGPT that can help you with, awareness teaching, and also to hit home too, like Fletus said, those one-on-one conversations can go a really, really long way, especially if you're small. You have the time and the resources to actually have conversations with people. You don't have to have this huge blanket training or something like that.
All right.
And
Okay.
Sid.
Yep. Sid.
So I want to talk about what Russell in chat has brought up. Well, it's not recently, but this year, as part of our mail deliverability, the first thing that we did was DMARC, which is made up of SPF and DKIM. And honestly, that is low-hanging fruit. It stops your server from being a open relay. You have some way of verifying what's going through. And just setting those things up in your DNS is very easy. And the guides to doing that are just out there free for the reading. It's if you do not do that, you've not done your due diligence. And that's just a basic thing you have to do.
Yeah, I agree. I speak a lot to startups on cybersecurity, and that's one of the tips that we give them, because it's so easy for them to set up, and basically it stops their domain from being spoofed in messages to their customers or people that they trust, and likewise it allows them to quarantine things that are coming from people who are not sending from the servers that have been authorized by the parent center. So that's great. Anyone else on the panel? Okay.
Michelle has her hand up.
Yep.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Michelle.
Say that's the basics, isn't it? And I've worked with very large organizations that didn't have that set up, that were extremely large, which won't surprise anybody here. Which is why when I go in and I'm asked to help with the strategy, I don't do the technical side of things, because I wouldn't be like me trying to give you legal advice on, or to tell you how to fix your car. But I do tell them you should have a competent cybersecurity person in there, a CISO, some kind of person in there to start with, who can advise you and who isn't just telling you oh, we'll go and buy this amazing tool, because you've got to do the basics, and the basics should be fundamental, really. So
yeah. And then if you can't afford to have that person as a full-time, entity, think about that fractional CISO or fractional security awareness, managers, and just there's a lot of people that are able to give up pieces of their time to help small businesses and small enterprises, start to succeed before you have the ability to pay someone full-time to be your security, lead. So great points from everyone. Thanks for answering the question. I hope we helped you.
Yep. So I'm just going to review the results from our poll. We had 28 people participate. That's great. And so 43% of people said email sender addresses should be a priority for teaching people how to spot cyber attacks. That is the highest one. 18% on email attachments, as well as 18% on account activity notification. And then another 18% on people who just posted the clues that were in the chat, and a few on SMS. So that's really helpful. Thanks very much, folks, for that.
Yeah.
Any last comments, Ryan, on the poll?
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, Rebecca in the chat under clues, just two things that are very important. I'd say urgency and heightened emotion.
Yes,
and just to understand those emotions across all the attack vectors, and that's what the threat actors are trying to do. They're trying to enact those emotions of greed or fear, and all these different things. So if you get a level headed to look at things, but it's a good kind of sense. Hey, I feel off because of this email, right?
Yeah.
That is a sign that maybe something isn't right. This text message made me worry that Scott needs these gift cards in the next hour. I'm going to get fired. I seriously get one a week at this point from Scott. I mean, I don't know how many gift cards this guy needs, but it's becoming a bit of a problem.
Yeah. And
but that's a great point.
As people, start to get used to the idea of, being somewhat aware of the links that can be tricky, then the attackers are starting to shift their tactics, and they are using the emotional triggers and things that get people to take action without thinking about the procedures that they're supposed to be following. And so I'm just going to take a moment to mention ClickArmor that sponsors this session. ClickArmor is a security awareness training platform that is highly interactive and allows you to create a lot of employee risk simulation situations that can teach people about things that they're going to see in the real world. So we know that the platform isn't everything, but it's a big part of getting security awareness to be accepted and engaging for employees. And so the reason that we have these sessions is because we know the platform isn't everything. We know that there has to be a lot of collaboration and thought and dialogue with people in addition to the platform. But ClickArmor does provide really good outcomes in terms of employee relevant scenarios, positive and inclusive experiences, and safer ways for people to experiment and try responding to certain things, certain situations beyond email. We have social engineering scenarios where it is things like portable storage devices or phone calls, or just those, what I call the slow con email, where you just get an email or a text message that is, hey, are you busy, from an employee, or from an employee who gets it from the CEO. And that's what Ryan's talking about. So all this stuff can be done really quickly and with a lot of automation to help people who aren't necessarily career educators, right? The people running security awareness training programs don't have a lot of time. As we talked about a day in the life last time, you got a lot of things to do. So that's why ClickArmor is built the way it is, not only with gamification to make it highly educational or interactive and effective, but to help make it easier to manage. So with that, let's move on to our second open question, which is, what are the most valuable clues relating to phishing and other attacks, aside from hyperlinks, that employees need to learn about? And that's really the poll question that we just had. So if we looked at things like sender addresses, how can we teach people about these things to make sure that they are able to properly spot them and analyze them? So I'll turn it over to the panel, see if anybody has their hands up at the moment. There's
Fletus,
Erin.
Erin.
I should leave it to Ryan to moderate so that we don't conflict on who's going next.
Oh, Fletus just threw his hand up and down. He's just messing with me anyway. So we'll let Erin go first.
Go ahead, Erin.
So when I used to have conversations with people or do sessions after I ran a phishing simulation, it's funny because you can teach all these things. You always can. You can teach sender address, hovering over the links. You can teach them to look at the logo and everything in it. But one of the most important things that I would always teach is, as silly as it sounds, if you are tempted for some reason to click on a phishing link or an attachment, count to 5 before you do that. Because again, it sounds childish, but sometimes we don't teach people that in this day and age where it's constantly go, 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 and we have to have productivity at an all-time high, we don't slow down in our inbox. Like, we just try to power through everything and we don't stop to smell the roses here and to sniff out if there might be something a little bit suspicious about that phish or that email in general. So counting to 3 or counting to 5 might give yourself the space to see some of those flags that we talk about, the sender address, the hovering over the link. So I never say to do it for everything, because my God, that would slow us down so much. But if for some reason there's some temptation to click on a link or to take you somewhere outside of your network where you're kind of protected, then give yourself that space to actually slow down for a second. And if it means counting 5 seconds on your fingers to practice, more power to you.
Yeah, before they click. I was thinking that there should be a parody song on the Carrie Underwood song. You know, how does it go? Something about when he
before he cheats.
Before he cheats, that's right.
Yeah.
Before you click.
Before
I
you
was just thinking of the hand washing song that we all got reminded of because of a recent pandemic. And I mean, I think we're just a few minutes away here from coining our own song for think before you click.
That's it. Yeah. All right. Ryan, who's next?
Next up would be Michelle. Michelle?
She's trying to get off mute, but
Hey, yeah, sorry, no, we've got a really bad line here today, so I think it must be the heat. Because we have heat in England for once. It's very unusual.
Just once a year.
Yeah, just once a year for like 5 days. That's it, make the most of it, enjoy. I actually don't think you can tell anymore. And I think we've obsessed over phishing far too much for too long, to the point where people are just so bored of it. And then and yes, there are really important things that people can look for, but the simple fact is that everybody's so stressed. We're talking as though work is a utopia, and it really isn't. People have been laid off. They're scared of being laid off. They're back into the office when they don't want to be there. Half their team's been laid off. They're now doing twice as much work. The world is literally on fire, flooding or doing what else. And I say this every time. And we're not meeting that. And so I think the most important thing we can do is say, well, you just have no idea. Because I see stuff all the time and I think, thank God I didn't get that, because I wouldn't have known. And often it isn't even like urgent or, you know, authority bias or whatever else. You know, sometimes it's just something totally normal and it's really, really good. Or they'll direct you to a completely legitimate site, but there'll be something horrible hidden. So you actually don't stand a chance. So again, your security control should be what is supporting your end users. And I just say the other thing is, you know, when I work with startups, I say allow people to build out that time to respond to messages in the day, because that is your biggest weapon, is having a supportive environment. But realistically, the only nothing can like stop you. You can't just assume you're going to recognize it. Taking your time does help. I always say that. But it's your security controls at the end. That's always what you see there.
Yeah, great. I mean, a great comment, and a few just from the chat before I hand it over to Fletus. Just Russell says, teach how to read and analyze message headers. You know, that's another kind of technical skill that I think a lot of people, you know, again, you can't do it all the time, to Erin's point, but if you have that knowledge, at least you can take that, you know, next step yourself. And then at Popsicle, we teach breathing techniques and meditation exercises when addressing phishing and cyberbullying. So again, fantastic advice of just being able to kind of reset yourself and remove yourself from that emotional spike that you may be experiencing, that you don't even know you're experiencing, because again, it's been, you know, brought out of you. And then I think we brought up, Rebecca brought up kind of those sense of urgency and heightened emotions again. So thank you everyone in the chat. Keep the comments coming. Fletus, all yours.
So a lot of good comments, and I agree with a lot of them. So I'm going to pull some nuggets out of each of them. I do agree that, like, we have to use common sense. So for those who've heard me talk on here, and if you listen to my talk recently, it's like, how did you learn about something? How do you know when to open your front door? There's certain techniques that you do day in and day out. Like you learn basic techniques. And to Michelle's point and Erin's, we have to bring it into our workforce. Like there is no separation anymore. Like I work out of my house. I work remote. I've been remote. Like there is no separation. So like what I apply personally, I have to apply professionally. What I do professionally, I apply personally. And because I'm in the security operations, teaching the employees what controls we do have in place, understanding how they interact with them, because I've seen, how do you report? Do you have a phishing button? Do you have a forwarding address? Do they know how to use that? Have you shared how to? Do you respond to them? And if you don't respond to them, do you give them the ability to do that? So stuff like that, teach them how to report, what technologies you have in place. So sometimes you're going to have to open the resume because you're a talent manager and you're going to have to trust the endpoint tool to protect you when you open the resume. There's certain times you're going to have to open invoices because your accounts payable. You're going to have to trust your technology to catch the malicious invoice or resume.
And Erin.
I just want to quickly play devil's advocate to somebody's comment, just real quick. I agree with, like I said, like Fletus said, mostly what everybody has said. But about teaching employees to use something like a sandbox to assess an attachment or link can be very tricky. And it's something that I thought about previously when I was talking with my SOC in my last company. Why don't we just teach people how to do this? And the response was, because they might actually click on the link. And if you don't teach people, or you're not, it's kind of like giving a non-scientist like a really, dangerous beaker of a chemical and say like, figure out how to use this, and don't spill it on yourself. You're giving somebody who's not in this world, you're putting them in, the firing range here, potentially.
Yeah, potentially, yeah.
To do that.
It's kind of like, or you could look at it, in another sense of like, we all know roughly how to change the oil in our car, but none of us are going to do it, right? We leave that to the experts, but still having that base knowledge of how to change the oil is still kind of nice, so you understand the process. So I think, maybe if you say like there is a way to be able to analyze emails and headers and these things to extract this information to make sure, and you're more than welcome to know and do it. But, keep in mind, there is a security team and a SOC that will do all this for you. Maybe it's just giving those people that little bit of reinsurance. But yeah, you're kind of playing with fire at times. If you get a little too much into that, valid point.
I like your analogy too about changing.
I took that from Michelle.
That's your job.
Michelle said earlier about fixing your own car.
Yeah. Why are we asking them to do our job? That's like finance saying, just go and pay this invoice, or HR saying, just onboard this person, marketing saying, can't you just create that, that deck and go out and do that? And sales going, hey, go and do the biz dev. And this is why I think we have so many layoffs in the sector at the moment, because we're basically saying, oh, but we're not capable of doing our job. Other people have to do our job, because that is the SOC's job. That's why people are on 6-figure salaries in some cases, and we should deserve that money. I know not all of us are, but I do think we should prove that we actually have a job and that we deserve our jobs, rather than saying, oh yeah, just go and do our job, because then you're going to do yourself out of a job. I think people need to kind of think longer term and think, well, if they can do my job, if I'm saying ChatGPT can create my strategy, or ChatGPT can do this, or this button can do this, that's great. But then you're actually doing yourself out of a job, and you're going to do lots of other people out of a job, and it also won't do it effectively. So I do think we need to stop pushing back on our co-workers, because they are not pushing back on us and giving us their work to do. And we do tend to get paid significantly more than some of them do. So
if I can just quickly jump on Michelle on her point too. We have recoined the term in my current role that security is not everybody's job. It is everybody's responsibility. It is not your job. My job is to make sure that security is easy for you. My job is to talk to my company and say, how can we make security a better integrated part of your day-to-day, so that you can have the responsibility to make sure your information and you are secure, but it's not your job to do it. So Michelle, I agree with you.
Yeah. And again, some great comments in the chat. Frederick says, I always teach that red flags are important to identify, but can easily be spoofed. So there's no 100% foolproof method, right? It's always a 3-step process. 1, stop before you do, which is click, open, fill in, etc. 2, think, which a lot of us don't take the time to think about a lot of things we do. It's just so instinctual. And, 3, take the risk because it's on you. So, again, if you start to, teach these methods and be very transparent about everything, then hopefully you give the users a little bit more power to make those, more critical decisions and less emotional decisions. Anyone else in the panel before we take a step forward? Sid, it's all yours.
Yeah, I'd just like to say regarding sandboxing, if you do not want to have a phishing button, then sandbox the entire browser. Have everything that the browser is doing sandboxed. It's possible, it could be expensive, but that's a part of ZTNA. I want to talk about working from home and not having connection to Active Directory. You've got a local account, it opens up a lot of things. You still have a huge amount of employees working from home, including people on the finance team. They are printing out invoices that were supposed to be paperless. And what are they doing with them? They're supposed to come and shred them. So there are these processes that are mapped out at some point. Let's map them out again in the context of people being at home. And there's all of these things come into play about phishing, etc. Because they may
right
not
to Fletus's point. To Fletus's point, I mean, people are probably going through mail and going through people's recycling and going through, right? Because think about the things you could harvest, out of everyone's garbage these days because everyone's working from home, and so that's super great point, Sid.
So actually, this is really a fun topic because I won't say where I did this. I was doing work for different agencies, call it before, and during Security Awareness Week there was a course that you could go to for 3 hours to learn dumpster diving, and they would sit everybody around the table. This is a cool idea for organizations that want to do something unique. Sit everybody around the table, and the guy literally dumped a garbage bag on the center of every table, and you had to go through all the stuff. It was typical things you'd find in the garbage, except it wasn't all that mucky. So you'd find, prescriptions and invoices and things, and you had to try and guess what the person who lived at that address did for a living. So it's kind of a fun, way to do it, but I don't see that done very often, but it's a really good point.
A quick little story. I may have lived in cottage country in the past, and I may have been frustrated with the fact that a lot of cottagers dump their garbage on the side of the roads before they go home for the weekend rather than take it to the dump. And I may have picked that bag up and gone through it with a pair of gloves and found out where that garbage belonged, and I may have returned it to their front porch. So yes, be careful of what you leave in your garbage. It could come back to haunt you.
Nice. Just want to finish off the second poll question, just the responses we got. The question was, has your organization been a victim of a social engineering attack not via email recently? And 21% of the people said yes, 47% said no, and 32% said they didn't know. So interestingly, not so much on the social engineering side as I might have expected. So we'll end that poll and move on to the next and last.
So before we move on, I want to add something about the story and what Sid just said. So we talk about clean desk policies. I want to talk about a clean desktop, like your virtual desktop. We screenshot a lot of things and we leave it sitting just on the desktop. How many people lock their computer at home when they get up and walk away? How many always throw away and clean up their desk when they get done at home before they sign off for the day? These are things our employees can learn from because I have 2 interns. One's 8, one's 6. They can carry things away at any given time. And now I've lost control of that document. They can touch my laptop if I don't lock it and delete a file, move a file, send a file accidentally. So clean your desktop up, clean your actual physical desk, just to go to Sid's point, and then the dumpster diving story from earlier. I don't have to dumpster dive. I can walk up to your desk or walk up to your desktop. And
one slight step further, let's all remember we should be sharing just tabs or windows and not your entire desktop whenever you are screen sharing as well. That's no different than just putting everything on display as far as what applications you use, files you have open, messages that come in, you know, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of information could be harvested from our screen shares
Yeah.
that we're
Oh,
all
yeah.
doing.
One other
Right? It's
quick.
like leaving your window open in your car while you go out for a few hours. Do you want someone going through your registration and finding the change under your seat and borrowing a piece of gum, you know? Or do you just put up your windows?
So
Yeah.
tab controls, like what plugins are you showing on screen shares? What apps
Yep.
do you show that are open on the bottom of your screen? Do you show the OS to people? Like there's this basic recon that happens just from just sharing your screen. Like I can see what tabs you have open. I use tab groups in Chrome for that very reason. I hide my tabs. So if I have to share the entire browser window, they're in a tab group. You can just see that I have a tab group. You don't see what every tab is.
Cool. All right. Gonna go to our last question right now, which for the panel is, how can organizations enable employees to be more capable of spotting clues that uncover attacks? So not necessarily specific tips on, particular clues, but how do we make them more open to stopping and thinking, as we talked about before they do stuff?
Fletus, you can kick this one off.
Yeah, I'm just going to reiterate. I like the deep breathing, the pausing,
Yeah.
counting, saying happy birthday like you're washing your hands. Like they can be childish, but they actually relax you. Like we know, like every 7 minutes you have to context switch because someone stops paying attention. So that's why, like when you're talking, you have to throw a joke in, you have to throw something out to bring the reader back, to get their attention back. So same thing happens here, is find ways to break the context, the monotony of your live training, your CBTs, that you can keep them in check to help them with their awareness. So the breathing, and then the new tick of make sure you break up the monotony of your speech by changing the topic every 7 to 10 minutes to make sure that they are still focusing.
Yeah, awesome. Erin?
Reiterating, it's just a reminder not to go on autopilot for stuff. And we do constantly. But the other thing too, and again, I'm saying this from a security awareness perspective, is learning your business, learning the different functions of your organization to better train each particular group. Now, I am the resource that they have to be able to do that, and I can allot my time to actually learn the other functions BAU. But that is a really important way to make sure that you're teaching somebody something that's relevant to them. How are you going to spot something that's very specific to you, or attacks that have been very targeted at your specific group?
Cool. Quick question for you, Erin. You just mentioned, it sounded to me like you said the other functions BAU, which I think is business as usual. I just wanted to confirm for anybody that.
Yes, sorry.
Didn't
Is
know.
our business as usual? So what does it look like day to day for you? What kind of, because I know personally, so the company I work for right now is not an email first company. So most of us don't use our email very frequently. So I maybe check mine once every couple of days. But there are people who are going to be using email in my company because they work with a lot of external people. So what looks like advice for me is going to be very different advice for them. So learning what they do on a day-to-day basis, learning how their job functions is really, really important.
All right. I'm going to launch one more poll question, which is this time about portable storage devices. Just asking if organizations have policy requirements around portable storage devices, since they are becoming a little bit more used these days. Is it never insert a non-corporate device into a corporate computer? Are you running malware scans individually on non-corporate devices before using them? Or do you just always require people to take a device to the service desk and have it scanned or have the data extracted for them? Or maybe you don't have a policy, or maybe you've got something else or don't know. So Rebecca says disallow external data devices. Cool. Yeah.
That's a good one.
Anybody have comments on this question?
I'll go with Fletus.
Whoops, unmute again. Most of the time it needs to be business driven. So this, going back to another conversation we've had here, is role based. While certain roles to have access to this. It may be part of someone's 3-2-1 strategy where they're actually copying it and making that third level and then taking it and putting it somewhere else because they're business centric and they're not syncing to the cloud. It may be because they need to take a tool because they're going on site and then they get their client to scan it or they share it. A lot of people are still using cloud, but some big file transfers still have to be put on a drive to walk around. And from my point of view, in my role, we put certain things on drives so that we have a go bag. Our tools are sitting on a drive. I don't have to have internet connectivity to put a tool on a box. I can bring the MSI, the executable, the binary, the script over from that portable drive. So it's role-based. A lot of the policies we have is we ask them to tell us, like report it, open a ticket, send a Slack message because we're Slack first, or just throw it in our Slack channel. Hey, I'm plugging this in. Let me know if you see something. Because we told them we have tools, we scan it. So we'll tell you if we're about to rip a file off your drive and if you need it back. Because sometimes you may have a file that we see as malicious, but it actually is business critical. It's just the behaviors of it, the heuristics of the file is why I removed it from your drive.
Great point. Next up, I think we'll say Sid, then Michelle.
So we have endpoint software that we can control at a granular level, like Fletus said, and we could allow somebody to insert a device or not based on what their role is. By default, it's just you're not allowed to. Both our endpoint management and the endpoint detection as just will not allow it by default. If it does allow it, there is sandboxing involved, and as Fletus said, there's heuristics, and it tries to learn what is normal. But I want to go one step further, and you guys have been talking about knowing personally what somebody does, but even beyond that, a lot of companies don't even bother mapping processes and knowing what is normal day to day, and that you have, and that in a certain job you are hitting these things. So a person, not heuristics, should be able to know this is not normal, that when you are getting, you're spotting clues that this is not normal in my day-to-day work. So don't touch that thing.
Awesome. Any others?
Yeah. Michelle.
Just very quickly, I think it's very important to remember that, what I can speak from having worked in education and around education for around 20 years, and I still do go in for education settings. If you're an external speaker in a school, you are most likely, they'll ask you to come in and bring your USB stick with your talk on it, with your slides on it. And if I could nuke one thing, it would be that. But when we talk about kind of your business as usual, we have to understand that not everybody is working in a really fancy corporate environment where they can automatically block somebody plugging that in. I've worked for organizations where you didn't even have a CD-ROM or whatever else, and everything was blocked and you couldn't do it. And it was really, if somebody saw you plugging something in, they'd report you immediately. The other end of the spectrum. So not everything is corporate, and I think that's where a lot of the education needs to be.
So I've worked in organizations where they glue them shut. If they're on the devices, they're capped. Like they can't be accessible. Like that's usually in their servers, that's usually in your data center. But I've seen it on some laptops where they don't want you to plug in. They physically remove the port by gluing it or capping it shut. So for you to unglue it or uncap it, you've took intentionality, and now you've violated policy because you physically damaged your box. So it's a different policy on that place.
Yeah. And I think it's really important just in the whole discussion to remember that not everybody has the capabilities all the time, just like we don't. Or, if I said to everybody on the panel, or if I go to a security conference and go, okay, raise your hand if you know like 5 different ways you can put accessibility into your work. How many slides do you see which have got alt text and stuff? We don't do it as a sector most of the time. I know because I check. So then to suggest that people should be taking time out of their day to secure an organization which arguably is probably about to lay them off, probably hasn't paid them well, and probably is making them go RTO 5 days a week or 3 or whatever else, which they hate. So where's the motivation? Like I'll move heaven and earth for accessibility as a person, but am I going to really care about my organization necessarily if they didn't pay me properly? Because I care more about my humans than I do about the organization. It's uncomfortable there, but
Yeah. All right. I think we're pretty close to having to wrap things up. It's like 1 minute to the hour.
Mhm.
Just want to thank everybody for their comments so far today. Really appreciate that. If you can think of anything that I mentioned earlier, if you can write anything in the chat that you thought was really useful, either for executives, for implementers, or for individuals, love to hear in the chat from you. And also just want to let you know that for the next session, I think actually before we get to the next session, it's coming up to October, only a few weeks away. We do have the special from ClickArmor that is the Security Awareness Month Challenge Pack. It's 4 gamified challenges. Each one takes like 3 minutes to do, really easy to deploy to your team, and it makes something really unique and special for people. So do try to reach out either via the QR code or just reach out to Ryan or myself afterwards and find out more about this. Lastly, our next session will be the 20th, 2 weeks from today at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. What should be in an annual security awareness program? So this is around the content and the activities that security awareness managers or their team needs to be doing. So that should be a fun one. It'll be, again, similar to the day in the life of a security awareness manager, but looking at the whole year's activities. So really want to thank everybody once again, all the panelists and everybody who took the time to chat. Hope to see you again in 2 weeks, and have a great day.